out. Good morning, Judge Hood. How are you doing?
All right, yourself?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for taking a few moments out just to talk to me about your experience at Third Circuit Court, your experience as far as being a judge. And I just want to try to capture what that experience was like for you. So,
Absolutely.
starting out, just sort of sum up, in a sentence of two, what do you think about being a judge?
It is a huge responsibility and requires, I have found that it requires balancing a lot of, at times, conflicting interests. The most obvious being efficiency and fairness. And particularly for this court, that's the ability to do that is critical.
Okay. And how long have you been doing it?
As of today, I believe it is 2 years and 11 months, 2 years and 10 months, 2 years and 10 months.
Okay. And I'm sure you came into the role with some idea what it was going to entail, and I'm sure you got some surprises along the way. What were some of
Absolutely.
those surprises?
So I think I was most surprised with I guess, at least in its current form, I was most surprised with how limited some of the decision-making ability is, um, particularly with sentencing. I found that for the most part, many of the cases involved sentence agreements. If there was a plea, there was also a sentence agreement, which is fine, because the parties have the ability to work it out amongst themselves. But at times I've found that part of it to be frustrating, particularly early on, before I felt more comfortable giving cops that I thought were the right sentence, regardless of whether it was higher or lower than what the prosecution was offering to a given defendant.
Okay. Okay. It seems like there's this perception people have when they think about judges, when they think about the law, is what we see on TV. And the way you're describing it is so different. What would you tell the TV viewer, how not to be deceived?
I guess I would tell them the same thing that I've often told jurors during voir dire, which is this is not TV. There's not going to be a ton of surprises or witnesses that burst in through the doors at the last minute. There's not typically a lot of drama, at least at trial, or the motion practice leading up to trial. Sentencing may be a different story, but really what you see is argument and evidence presented in a sober, straightforward fashion. And I think that's the part of it that is different than TV. It doesn't look very exciting in our day-to-day, even though I think practitioners will find aspects of it very exciting. There are, even in the past 4 months, we have gotten some what I think are exciting motions filed on cases that otherwise don't seem to set the world on fire. CCW cases and resisting obstructing cases, where you see motions that probably should have been filed for the past 10 or 15 years that I think are now being pressed, whether it's through COVID or through a push to kind of pick apart cases that might have been charged, where maybe a second look at them would have warranted some discretion.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's something that is exciting, I think, for practitioners, but for someone who's used to watching court TV, you may not be able to appreciate that nuance, even though it could potentially change somebody's life.
And I think that's a good thing, that we should be aware of too. It may not be exciting, but it is life changing, at least for those who are appearing at that counsel table on the defense side.
Right.
And like you pointed out, coming to jury services and coming with that idea in mind that you could very well be making some determinations that can impact lives is something huge.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about a little bit about your pathway to becoming a judge. Share some of that.
So immediately prior to my appointment in 2019, I worked as an assistant U.S. attorney at the Eastern District of Michigan, specifically assigned to the healthcare fraud unit. I was only there briefly for about 6 months, but I was with the Department of Justice for a total of 5 years. So before working at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Detroit, I'd worked for about 4.5 years, 4 years and 8 months at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Ohio in the Toledo branch office. And there, my focus, we're a branch office, so we all did a little bit of everything. Everyone did
Mhm.
firearms, everyone did prosecuted crimes against children, immigration crime. But there was me and one other guy that were kind of the fraud, white collar, public corruption guys. And we we were responsible for all of the federal cases in the 21 counties in Northwest Ohio. And that's really where I learned how to try cases. Um, it was a very lean office. I think pound for pound, we tried a lot of cases for compared to other U.S. attorneys' offices, and did some complicated and interesting work. And from that experience, ultimately, one of our teams got recognized by the FinCEN director in 2018 related to SAR review. Not to get too far into the weeds, but kind of a technical type of investigation related to Bank Secrecy Act data. And it was, I've described it to other folks as it was a very fun job.
Okay.
I won't say that it was a better job, but certainly day to day, it was, it may sound immature to describe it that way, but it was fun because you had a lot of autonomy, a lot of autonomy and ability to shape outcomes by working from the start of the investigation. And before that, I worked at Miller Canfield here in Detroit in the litigation unit, doing commercial litigation.
So you've done private practice, public sector, and then the judgeship.
Yes,
So you've pretty much had a wide gamut of things that you've seen and done.
there might be folks who disagree with that, but I like to think so.
Okay, okay. What would you say to someone who is aspiring to become a lawyer, a high school student?
I would not discourage them. I think a lot of times lawyers will, not a lot of times, but sometimes lawyers will talk down to high school students who say they want to be a lawyer, who may not really know what goes into that. And I don't know that that's the right way to do it. I think I would encourage them to talk to folks that they know who are lawyers, to the extent that they're able to check out cases now that they're being broadcast on YouTube, going to courthouses where they're allowed to go into the courthouse as as someone who's under 18. And the mentor to my mentor was a fellow named Haywood Burns. He was a mentor to Mac Faison, who mentored me when I was at Miller Canfield. And he has this quote that says, he speaks about lawyering in the terms of capital. He says, and the problem is not the overproduction of lawyers. The problem is the distribution of lawyers, where they are and whose interests they serve. And in that respect, we need lawyers. We need good lawyers who are working for interests that are underrepresented.
Awesome. And what skills do you think would be important for a high school student to focus on if they're thinking about pursuing a career in law?
I think the most important skill is curiosity, and that can come in a lot of different forms. Oration, I think, is always helpful, though there's a lot of good orators that are not persuasive. Really, I think the root of persuasion is having curiosity, asking questions and getting answers, and being able to think about things from different angles. There's plenty of high school students that I've met since I've been on the bench, and throughout my community service, who are curious in a lot of different ways, and that may manifest itself in speech writing or oration, but it may also manifest itself in different ways. But I think curiosity is the most important, you would call it a skill, but the most important trait to develop to
Mhm,
become a good
mhm.
lawyer.
Okay. You mentioned something about mentorship too, and you said you had a mentor when you were at Miller Canfield. What about mentors prior to that?
Absolutely. I don't know that I had good mentors in law school, and that probably is something that I would do different if I could do law school again. But I benefited from having good mentors throughout my life. Starting starting in high school at Cass Tech, Mr. Mathis and Mr. Elamine on the academic games team were
Okay.
mentors in terms of academic games and life, and I still rely on lessons that they taught me. But more recently, also at Miller Canfield, a fellow named Joe Vernon, who is still a young lawyer, but was a young partner at the time that I was starting there, really kind of took me under his wing to show me how to do the work and show me how to survive in that environment. Um, at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Toledo, uh, because it was a small office, I benefited from having a few mentors because it was so tightly knit. But Gene Crawford was my trial partner. He was a West Point graduate, former artillery officer, went to OSU for law school, and really tried cases in a sober, deliberate, straightforward fashion. And everything that I know about trying cases, I more or less learned from Gene. I would say everything I know about PowerPoint presentations for opening and closing, I also learned from them. But I've benefited from mentors throughout. And here at the court, that's proven to be true. Judge Edwards, Judge Michael Hathaway, but even on more informal scale, I have found, at least in the criminal division, that there is a collegiality amongst the judges where for technical legal issues and even logistical issues during COVID, we reach out to each other, and I've benefited from guidance from Judge Bazzi, Judge Talon. A lot of folks have shared their wisdom with me so long as I was willing to listen.
Awesome. Do you see our judicial system like evolving? And if so, where do you think it'll be in 50 years from now?
I do see it evolving. I don't know that all the evolution is for the good. Um, the as much as Zoom Court provides some uh, benefits in terms of accessibility, I think it makes certain things harder for folks who are already maybe disenfranchised. Um, you know, everyone in the criminal division, I'm sure, has had the experience of someone who is at work that doesn't have time to take off to get on the Zoom and wait for their case to be called. So they're at Amazon and they're running out to their car um, to get on Zoom for their case. Whereas pre-COVID, maybe they would take the day off of work or take a certain half day off work to come down to the courthouse, and that's all they're focused on, rather than spreading their attention thinly between work and court at the same time. Um, that is one aspect that I am concerned about, because I think as we come out of COVID or learn to live with COVID or whatever the catchphrase is now, we're my worry is that it may end up being the worst of both worlds, where we find judges and practitioners toggling between in-person and Zoom hearings, particularly for high volume courts. And I'm not sure that everyone appreciates exactly how difficult that is for the practitioners. And the longer we do it, I think the more depleted that vital resource will become. My hope is that that concern of mine is misplaced, and that as we move forward 50 years from now, we'll see fundamental changes in kind of how we go about doing business to make sure that every case has the appropriate time and attention that it deserves, even if it seems like it's not, for the guy on a CCW case, that is the most important thing in his life going on, even though you may also have a murder case and a CSC case that, are going forward too. But for the working stiff who was driving around with a gun in a car, or any number of other sorts of cases, for them, that is the most important thing in their life. And if we give it short shrift or move too fast through it, then ultimately folks don't feel that they have a fair shake. My hope is that with improvements in technology and improvements in how we look at our justice system, 50 years from now, more people will be walking away from court feeling as though they've been heard and that at least they got a fair shot.
I'm going to end with this question, and then I'm going to ask if there's something that you wish I had asked that I didn't. Who's your hero? If you had to select someone, living, dead, whatever, who's your hero and why?
Wow, that's a great question. I'm sad that I don't have an answer right off the top of my head. No, scratch that. I do have an answer off the top of my head. Nancy Page. Nancy Page is my grandmother, my mother's mother. And she is easily not just the brains of the operation, but the heart of the operation. She is easily the hardest working, most unflappable person I know. Everything that I know about work ethic, diligence, treating people fairly, not despairing at the end of a totally rough day, I learned those lessons from her. And I don't know what she did for a living. I just know she was working in, I know she was working in computers when computers were on index cards. And
wow.
she something with the Defense Department that she doesn't talk about. And she is one of the smartest, hardest working people I know. And I would say that she is my hero.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm sure she's very proud of you and your elevation to the Court of Appeals.
I hope so, but yeah, still trying to impress her.
Would you say you'll never know?
Right, right.
So what's the one question that I didn't ask that you wish I had, and what's your answer to it?
I was waiting for you to ask me something about jury trials and what I thought the restart would look like. And I don't know if I said I was worried. I was waiting for that question. And that's the challenge that we're going to have for the foreseeable future. I'll tell you, as when I drive home at the end of the day, if I take Woodward or if I take Hamilton or if I take the freeway, whether you're on Woodward or 8 Mile or any number of streets, every single bar and pizza shop and other establishment is open. And at a certain point, we're going to have to ask why this is one of the last things to open, when conceivably it probably should have been one of the first. I mean, before barbershops are back open, really we should have been on jury trials. I remember when there was a DOJ task force on reopening, under the previous administration, there was a task force on reopening. And when asked about the civil liberties that might be implicated by shutdown orders, never was it mentioned the right to a jury trial. And that's concerning to me because, it's a cost of citizenship. I didn't stop paying my taxes with the shutdown. People turning 18 still had to sign up for selective service. at a certain point, we're going to have to say, this is part of what you have to pay to be a citizen, in the same way that we did pre-COVID. And if you're
Mhm.
comfortable going to insert restaurant name here and eating with your mask down in a room that's full or half full of other people, perhaps you can also find a way to be comfortable assembling to make sure that your fellow citizen or another person accused of a crime on US soil gets their fair shake in the courthouse. That's going to be the real challenge. And that's the one thing that makes my departure bittersweet, because I was very anxious to be involved in what that process looks like.
And I think that process is moving forward, and we will see our doors opening more and more, with the precautions and the PPE and all of that. I think that we're at that point where we know that the importance of jury trials and trying to make sure they go forward as safely as possible.
Right.
Very powerful statement on that. Well, again, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And I definitely wish you the best. Any last words for Third Circuit Court?
Just thank you to all the people that do this work day in and day out. I hope when COVID is done, there's some folks at Frank Murphy who deserve a medal when this is all done. And Ms. Brown, I mean, you and the chief judge obviously too, but there's some folks that really deserve some recognition for the
Yes.
stellar work that they've done in this extraordinary time.
And you are among those. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ms. Brown.
So I